Follow Moonlit Romance Library for more moonlit love stories. Chapter 1. The last bottle of Moonwell medicine in St. Orizon was small enough to hide in Sarah Vale's fist. It shone blue through the glass, no larger than a lady's perfume vial, though it held enough medicine to keep 3 people breathing until dawn. On the other side of Sarah's clinic door, 3 people needed it. 12-year-old Mara coughed into a folded towel. Old Mr. Pell slept sitting upright, because lying down made his lungs rattle. Sister Anwin, who had washed plague sheets for 6 nights, had begun to smell of bitter almonds. Sarah knew that smell. So did the man who pushed through her door wearing a king's black cloak and 6 armed guards. Alpha Alaric Dane had once carried fevered children beside Sarah through streets filled with funeral smoke. He had once slept on her clinic floor because she had been too tired to walk home, his hand closed around her ankle as if even in sleep he feared losing her. Peace had changed him more thoroughly than plague ever had. His dark ceremonial coat was clean. His gloves were clean. Even his boots looked offended by the clinic mud. "Give me the Moonwell," he said. Sarah kept the vial behind her back. "Good evening to you too." His eyes flicked toward the curtained ward. The coughs behind it made one guard step away. Alaric did not move. That almost hurt more. He had not always been a coward. "Evelyn collapsed during the wedding rehearsal," he said. "The court physician says it is exhaustion, but I will not risk her life." "Then let the court physician prescribe rest." He prescribed Moonwell. "For a woman with no plague signs? She is to be my wife tomorrow, and those 3 are to be alive tomorrow." I had hoped we could satisfy both ambitions. His mouth tightened. Once, that expression had meant he was trying not to smile at her. Now it meant a room would soon regret disappointing him. "You always did enjoy making virtue sound like an insult," he said. "Only when speaking to men who wear it for state occasions." Behind the curtain, Mara coughed again. Sarah felt the vial warm in her palm. Alaric stepped closer. He smelled of cedar oil and winter roses, the court's answer to every odor produced by ordinary life. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I know what you think of me, but I remember those years. I remember holding you while the bells counted the dead. I am asking you to trust that I would not take this without need." That voice was the cruelest thing he had brought. It belonged to the young captain who had kissed the scar on her thumb and promised that when the fever ended, they would build a house with yellow shutters. The fever ended. He built a palace wing for Evelyn Harrow, whose laugh made old nobles feel young, and whose gowns never carried the scent of boiled bandages. "You told me last winter that my room smelled like a sick house," Sarah said. "Do you remember that too?" His gaze moved away for one heartbeat. There it was. Shame. Small, inconvenient, and not nearly strong enough to stop him. "Give me the vial." "No." He reached behind her. Sarah trapped his wrist with both hands. He was stronger. He had always been stronger, and he had once treated that fact as a reason to be gentle. Now he twisted free and closed his fingers around the bottle. Rage went white behind Sarah's eyes. She drove her knee into his thigh. Alaric staggered into the medicine cabinet. Jars jumped. One guard made a sound suspiciously like a swallowed laugh. "That was an assault upon the crown," Alaric said through his teeth. "No, that was a medical opinion delivered where you were most likely to feel it." He stared at her. For a moment she saw the man who used to adore her temper. Then his hand closed around the Moonwell. "Send me the bill," he said, and walked out. The door shut behind his guards. The blue light vanished with them. Sarah stood very still. Mara's mother came through the curtain. She had heard everything. Her face held no blame, which was worse than blame. "Doctor," she whispered. Sarah swallowed once. "Heat every kettle. Mr. Pell gets the willow steam. Sister Anwin gets the last of the blackroot. Mara gets my bed because she can breathe better near the window. Will it be enough?" Sarah looked at the empty space where the bottle had been. She had promised herself during the first plague that she would never lie to frightened families. "I don't know," she said, "but they will not face the night alone." She worked until sunrise. Mr. Pell lived. Sister Anwin lived. Mara stopped breathing for 12 terrible seconds before Sarah forced air into her lungs with a bellows and a child's leather mask. When the girl finally screamed, Sarah laughed so hard that she had to sit on the floor. 3 days later, a royal messenger arrived while Sarah was asleep beneath her desk. He wore a wedding ribbon on one arm and a quarantine ribbon on the other. "Dr. Vale," he said. The plague hound has chosen the queen. Chapter 2. The hound at her feet. The royal wedding feast had not stopped when the plague hound entered the ballroom. That offended Sarah more than the 600 candles. Musicians still held their bows above their strings. Noble women still stood beside tables loaded with sugared pears and glazed birds. Men in jeweled collars had gathered on chairs to keep their silk shoes away from the enormous brindled hound walking down the center aisle. At the far end of the hall, the newly married Queen Evelyn sat beneath a silver canopy. She was beautiful in the expensive, exhausting way court preferred. Gold leaves had been woven through her dark red hair. Her ivory gown was stitched with tiny moons. One hand rested in Alaric's. The other hand trembled. Bram ignored every guest. His black nose moved once near the ambassador from Lorne, twice near a sweating bishop, and not at all near a duke who smelled strongly enough of garlic to stun a horse. He walked to the dais, turned in one slow circle, and sat directly on the hem of Evelyn's wedding gown. Then he sneezed. The bishop fainted. No one caught him. Sarah entered through the open doors with her medicine case banging against her knee. The royal guards tried to block her until Bram's yellow eyes found hers. His tail struck the polished floor once. The guards moved. "Get that beast away from her," Alaric ordered. Bram yawned. His tongue curled. The expression was so deeply unimpressed that 3 servants looked at the floor to hide smiles. "He is a licensed quarantine officer," Sarah said, approaching the dais. "He is not a beast, and he does not belong to me. He sleeps in your clinic. So do 2 nuns, a smuggler, and occasionally a goat. I do not own them either." "The goat remains disputed," said a woman's voice behind her. Sorel Voss leaned against a pillar in a purple coat with 14 hidden pockets. Half the city called her a criminal. The other half called her when their children needed medicine after sunset. Sarah gave her a sharp look. "Why are you at a royal wedding?" "Professional curiosity. The rich hide better silverware." Alaric rose. "Remove both of them." Bram placed one heavy paw on Evelyn's embroidered shoe. The queen stared down at him. Her face had gone pale beneath the pearl dust on her cheeks. "Does he make mistakes?" she asked. Sarah heard the fear in her voice and disliked her slightly less for not pretending otherwise. "He once accused a cheese seller," Sarah said. "The cheese was later convicted." Evelyn's mouth twitched despite herself. "Sarah," Alaric warned. She knelt before the queen. Up close, she saw what candlelight had hidden. Evelyn's pupils were too wide. A faint pearl-colored line marked the skin beneath her left ear. No fever. No cough. No blue lips. But when Sarah held a small mirror under her nose, the queen's breath left a cloudy crescent that shimmered silver before fading. Sarah's stomach dropped. "Everyone stays where they are," she said. 600 guests immediately began speaking. Alaric stepped between Sarah and his bride. "Explain." "She is shedding silver vapor. She has not coughed once. That is the problem." The moonwell suppressed her symptoms. It did not cure what was inside her. The ballroom went quiet enough for Sarah to hear Bram's nails scrape the floor. Evelyn looked at Alaric. "You told me the blue medicine was a tonic." "It was a precaution." "Where did you get it?" His silence answered. Evelyn turned toward Sarah. The queen had received stolen medicine and sat in Sarah's place beside the man who once promised to marry her. Sarah expected arrogance, perhaps apology arranged to look like grace. Instead, Evelyn closed her eyes. "How many needed it?" she asked. 3. "Did they live?" "They did." "No thanks to either of you." Alaric's jaw hardened. "This is not the time." "It became the time when you brought her medicine to my dressing room," Evelyn said. Before he could answer, iron bells began ringing beyond the palace walls. 1, 2, 3. Quarantine bells. The ballroom doors slammed shut. Heavy bars dropped into place on the outside. Guests screamed. The duke, who smelled of garlic, climbed onto the dessert table, stepped in a custard, and sat down abruptly in the wedding cake. Through the high windows, Sarah saw lines of black armored riders entering the palace courtyard. Each wore a white half-mask marked with a red hand. Behind them rolled covered wagons, water cisterns, mobile furnaces, and squads of physicians carrying hooked staffs. At their center rode a man on a dark horse. He wore no mask. His black hair was tied at his neck. His face was elegant enough for a cathedral carving, and far too calm for a man arriving with furnaces. A long dark coat, fitted his broad shoulders without a single ornament except the silver seal of St. Orizon. Sorel came to Sarah's side. "That," she murmured, "is Lord Cashin Thorn." Sarah knew the name. Master of the Holy City. Commander of the Physician Guard. Alpha of the Southern Wolf clans. A man said to enforce medical law with one hand and battlefield law with the other. She watched soldiers unload oil beside the ballroom doors. "He is going to burn the infected," Sarah said. "Possibly the cake first," Sorel replied. "It has suffered enough." Sarah grabbed the nearest useful object, which happened to be a marble medicine pestle, and ran toward the doors. Chapter 3. Inspection or flirting. The ballroom doors opened just wide enough to admit Lord Cashin and 4 masked physicians. Sarah did not wait for an introduction. She ducked beneath the arm of a guard, crossed the space between them, and struck Cashin in the chest with the marble pestle. The sound was excellent. The result was disappointing. He looked down at the pestle, then at her. Up close, he was even more offensively handsome. His eyes were dark gold, his nose straight, his mouth shaped as if it had learned restraint only after considerable practice. He was perhaps 30, with no court softness in him despite the severe elegance of his clothes. Sarah tried to hit him again. He caught her wrist. His gloved hand circled it completely. He did not squeeze, but the control in the gesture sent a sharp awareness up her arm. "Doctor," he said, glancing at the pestle between them, "is this an examination or flirting?" "That depends. Are those furnaces for patients?" "For contaminated linens." "And the oil?" "Lamp oil. Physicians are famously less useful in the dark." Sarah looked past him. Soldiers were indeed setting up copper wash basins, not pyres. The covered wagons bore clean blankets. The hooked staffs were being used to lower food baskets from upper windows without opening doors. She lowered the pestle 1 inch. "You might have announced that. I rang 3 bells, displayed the medical standard, and brought 40 physicians. Your personality did not travel ahead of you." His gaze rested on her face. Something warm and dangerous moved through his expression. "No," he said. "It rarely does." Behind Sarah, Bram gave a low approving huff. Cashin released her wrist slowly. His thumb passed once over the pulse at its base, an unnecessary movement that made her forget the next sensible thing she had intended to say. Then he stepped around her and addressed the room. "By authority of the Sainted Medical Charter, this palace is sealed. No person leaves until examined. My eastern residence is included. My household is already confined. Every gate in St. Orizon is closed, including the gate beneath my own command." Alaric descended from the dais. "You do not confine a crowned alpha in his own palace." "I just did. My wife requires privacy. Your wife requires honesty, ventilation, and a physician who did not purchase his office from her uncle. Privacy is 4th. The court physician made a wounded noise. Cashin looked toward Sarah. "Dr. Vale, what did the hound detect?" She told him about the silver vapor, the pearl line, the stolen moonwell, and Evelyn's lack of symptoms. He listened without interruption. Not once did his eyes drift toward the shouting nobles or Alaric's anger. When she finished, he removed his gloves. His hands bore pale scars from old bites and chemical burns. A physician's hands, not a lord's decoration. "May I examine the queen?" he asked Sarah. The question startled her. It should have been addressed to Alaric or to Evelyn herself. Cashin seemed to notice her surprise. "You are the attending doctor," he said. "I do not enter another physician's case without permission. You entered the palace with an army. Armies require fewer manners." Sarah almost smiled. "You may examine her if she agrees." Evelyn nodded. Cashin climbed the dais, but Bram remained on the queen's train. When Cashin approached, the old hound leaned forward and sniffed his boots, his coat, then a location no solemn ruler wished examined in public. Cashin did not move. Sorel covered her mouth. "Your officer is thorough," Cashin said. "He is independent," Sarah replied, and apparently unimpressed by rank. Bram sneezed against Cashin's thigh. "I gathered that." The examination confirmed Sarah's fear. Evelyn carried ash fever without showing its usual signs. The moonwell had hidden the illness so completely that she had spent 3 days receiving wedding guests, embracing noble women, and dancing with ambassadors. She had become a beautiful weapon without knowing it. "The entire palace has been exposed," Cashin said. Panic struck the room like wind through wheat. He lifted one hand. Panic wastes breath. You may need yours. Sit with your households. Do not share cups. Do not touch the hound unless invited. He has standards. Bram began scratching one ear with a hind foot. The panic did not vanish, but it became embarrassed enough to lower its voice. Cashin turned to Sarah. I need a doctor who knows every old outbreak route in this city. You have 40. I have 40 who know maps. You know people. Flattery after unlawful wrist-grabbing? You struck me with stone. I considered us introduced. His mouth was solemn. His eyes were not. Sarah became aware that she was still holding the pestle. She set it on a silver tray. All right, she said. But if you order a cleansing fire, I will find a larger one. A larger fire? A larger pestle. Good. I dislike uncertainty. He offered his hand. Sarah looked at it, then took it. His fingers closed around hers with quiet strength. Across the ballroom, Alaric watched. For the first time since entering the palace, Sarah saw something on her former lover's face that was not anger or command. It looked very much like regret arriving early to an appointment. Chapter 4. How Sarah met the hound Cashin established the palace infirmary in the chapel because it had high windows, running water, and pews that could be converted into beds. The archbishop objected until Bram sat on his left foot. Why is he doing that? The archbishop asked. He sits beside illness, Sarah said, sorting clean cloths. The archbishop went pale. And liars, she added. He went paler. Sorel leaned toward him. You should hope for plague. The chapel emptied of objections. By midnight, Sarah had examined 53 guests. Cashin took the next 53. He moved with the efficiency of a surgeon and the authority of a general, but he warmed his stethoscope between his palms before touching frightened skin. Sarah noticed. She also noticed that he never told an exhausted healer to rest while continuing to pile work before her. When her ink ran dry, he replaced it. When a fevered baron vomited over her apron, Cashin handed her his own coat and cleaned the floor himself. Lords do that often in the holy city? She asked. Only glamorous ones. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows. The expensive line of his shirt made the scarred strength of his forearms more distracting than it had any right to be. Sarah looked back at her notes. Bram pushed his head beneath her free hand. She scratched the rough fur behind his ear. How did he become an officer? Cashin asked. By making a bishop look foolish. An established route to public service. Sarah glanced at Bram. The old hound's eyes had closed in bliss. His left hind leg began kicking the floor. 5 years ago, she said, the city found him in a tannery yard during the worst plague winter. He was in hound form and would not change back. The executioners assumed he was feral. The memory returned with the smell of wet leather and smoke. Sarah had been 27, exhausted, and angry enough to frighten men with axes. She had followed the sound of chains behind the tannery and found a giant brindled hound tied to a post. His ribs showed beneath his coat. One ear was torn. An executioner was reading a death order while 3 others argued about who had to stand closest. He is a plague wolf, the bishop had said. Animals carried the fever into the south ward. The chained hound ignored him. His nose remained fixed on a covered wagon leaving the yard. Sarah had watched the animal's nostrils move. Then she had smelled bitter almonds on the wagon driver's scarf. Stop that cart, she ordered. No one listened. So she picked up a shovel and put it through the front wheel. The cart tipped. The driver fell into a barrel of urine collected for tanning. The bishop shouted. The hound pulled the post out of the frozen ground and dragged it after him, straight to the covered wagon. Inside were 7 fevered children being carried out of the district to avoid quarantine records. The hound lay beside the smallest child and whined. He was not spreading plague, Sarah told the bishop. He was finding it. It is an animal. At that, the hound had shifted. Bones shortened. Fur withdrew. A shivering old man in torn underclothes remained chained in the mud, with a brindled beard and the same furious yellow eyes. Madam, he rasped to Sarah, if you could delay my execution until I locate my trousers, I would consider it a professional courtesy. Sarah gave him her cloak. His name was Bram Alder. He had been a battlefield scent runner before ash fever damaged his lungs. Remaining in hound form eased his breathing and sharpened his ability to detect infection. He could speak as a man, but preferred not to because, in his words, people offered dogs more sausages and fewer opinions. Sarah fought the city council for 9 weeks. Bram eventually received a legal identity as an independent quarantine officer, complete with a brass badge on his collar and a salary he collected personally on the first Monday of every month. He spends most of it at the butcher, she told Cashin. Bram opened one eye. A responsible citizen, Cashin said. The hound placed his enormous paw on Cashin's boot. What does that mean? He wants your sausage. Cashin surrendered the sausage from his untouched plate. Bram accepted it with dignity, swallowed it whole, and put his paw back. Now what? He wants mine too. Cashin gave him that one as well. Sarah watched the Lord of the Holy City negotiate badly with an elderly werewolf and felt something inside her, something locked since Alaric, shift half an inch toward the light. Then the chapel doors opened. Sister Leora stood there in a gray habit, clutching a stack of burial ledgers to her chest. She was small, sharp-faced, and visibly trying not to look at the body beneath a sheet near the altar. Dr. Vale, she said. The bells have started in Low Lantern. Sarah rose too quickly. How many? 17 houses since sunset. Cashin was already reaching for his coat. The palace must remain sealed, Alaric said from the doorway. He had changed out of his wedding clothes, but still wore the crown. No one leaves. Correct, Cashin said. You remain here. I meant Sarah. If Evelyn worsens, she needs the doctor who recognized this. Sarah looked at the man who had stolen medicine from 3 sick people to protect one woman he loved. Cashin looked at him too. Dr. Vale goes where the outbreak is, Cashin said. I will attend the Queen. You cannot command my subjects. Then consider this an invitation to embarrass yourself less. Alaric's wolf flashed amber in his eyes. Cashin's answered. The chapel seemed to shrink around them. Sarah stepped between 2 alphas before male pride became another condition she had to treat. I am not a bone, she said. Neither of you will growl over me. Bram growled. She looked down. He appeared pleased with himself. You are also on thin ice. His tail wagged. Cashin held out his coat for her. Low Lantern, doctor? Sarah put it on. It was warm from his body and smelled faintly of cedar smoke. Low Lantern, she said. This time, when Alaric watched her leave with another man, she did not look back. Chapter 5. The Lord who entered Low Lantern had once been the poorest district inside St. Orizen's walls. Now it was the poorest district outside them. The council had moved the western wall after a flood and left 6 crowded streets pressed between stone, river, and abandoned mills. No noble carriage went there unless it was lost. No tax collector went there without guards. Plague always knew the route. Cashin's physician guard reached the district before dawn. They erected wash tents at both ends of the main street, marked infected doors with yellow circles, and carried food to families under quarantine. No torches touched a roof. Sarah watched Cashin step from his horse, remove his jeweled sword belt, and replace it with a leather medicine satchel. You are entering? She asked. Yes. You have officers. So does Alaric. The simple answer landed harder than any boast. Alaric had entered plague houses during the old outbreak, when Sarah was beside him and the city praised his courage. After the bells stopped, he began sending officers in his place. He had said a ruler's life belonged to the realm. Cashin tied a cloth over his mouth. You disagree? No. I was remembering the difference between courage and reputation. His gaze sharpened, but he did not ask about Alaric. They entered together. The first house held 6 sick people and one healthy grandmother furious at everyone. She hit Cashin with a broom because she mistook him for a tax collector. He caught the broom on the second swing. Madam, he said, I am lord of the holy city. Then you can afford your own broom. Sarah turned her cough into her sleeve. Cashin examined the handle. Good ashwood. The grandmother snatched it back. Keep your eyes off it. By noon, Sarah's feet ached and her shoulders burned. The disease moved strangely. It had appeared in separated houses on the same night, with no chain of contact between them. A laundress who had not left her room in a week was ill. Her neighbors were not. 3 dock families were infected, but the tavern between them remained untouched. This was not how a natural outbreak breathed through a city. Bram moved from door to door, nose low. At every infected house, he scratched the threshold and sneezed. At healthy homes, he accepted bread with professional restraint. Near the old dye mill, he stopped. His hackles rose. A row of red notices had been nailed to 12 doors. Property condemned by order of the crown. Residents must vacate within 7 days for river improvement works. Sarah read the name beneath the order. Duke Corvin Vere, Master of Civic Lands. Evelyn's uncle. These notices went up before the wedding, Sister Leora said. She had followed with the burial books, and a handkerchief pressed beneath her nose. I remember because Mr. Tallow died while arguing with the clerk. Leora remembered every patient, every address, every date. She also feared corpses so deeply that she once climbed a statue to avoid a funeral procession. Sarah had never mocked her for it. Courage was not the absence of terror. Sometimes it was carrying burial ledgers into a plague street while refusing to look left. Cashin studied the condemned row. Who owns the river rights after evacuation? Vere Mercantile, Sorel said from a rooftop. Everyone looked up. She sat astride a chimney in her purple coat, lowering a sack by rope. You were confined to the palace, Cashin said. A hurtful rumor. I watched a guard lock you in a pantry. A very good pantry. It had another door. The sack touched the ground. Inside were Moonwell salts, blackroot, clean masks, and 12 bottles of Sarah's favorite cheap brandy. Medicine, Sorel said. The brandy is also medicine if the patient has recently met a duke. Cashin looked at the supplies, then at her. Where did you get these? I am a respectable importer. Bram climbed the stack of firewood beneath her and sat on Sorel's boot. She sighed. I stole them from a Vere warehouse. Why? Because I had already sold the legal medicine twice, and guilt was damaging my digestion. Sarah opened the sack. Every bottle bore a scratched mark on the base, a tiny lantern. Sorel had used that mark for years when leaving free medicine, where poor families could find it without suffering the humiliation of charity. How much do we owe you? Sarah asked. Your first child. Cashin's head turned. Sorel grinned. Interesting. No, Sarah said. Half your first child? Still no. Then name her after me. There is no child. There is not even a kiss, Cashin said. Sarah looked at him. His expression remained perfectly grave. Sorel nearly fell from the roof laughing. Bram barked once. The sound echoed through the empty mill. Then came an answering crash from inside. Cashin drew his sword. Sarah grabbed the abandoned broom, because the pestle was still at the palace. They entered the mill together. Behind a wall of rotting dye barrels, they found 20 new copper canisters stamped with the Vere crest. One had split open. Silver dust coated the floor. Bram would not go near it. On the wall above the canisters hung a city map. Thick black circles marked every condemned block in low lantern. Sarah did not need a tiny clue or a clever cipher. The plan covered the wall in ink large enough for a blind magistrate. The plague had not returned. Someone had delivered it. Chapter 6. The mill with no exit. The first fire arrow struck the roof before Cashin finished reading the map. Flame ran across the dry rafters. That seems unfriendly, Sorel called from outside. A second arrow shattered a window. A clay bulb tied behind its head burst against the floor, spreading oil. Cashin tore the city map from the wall and shoved it into Sarah's hands. Can you carry one canister? Yes. Can you carry it while obeying a reasonable instruction? That depends on whether you produce one. The corner of his mouth moved. Stay behind me. Unreasonable. Masked men rushed through the rear door. They wore Vere work coats turned inside out and carried clubs rather than swords. Dead physicians attracted investigations. Beaten ones could be blamed on frightened citizens. The first man swung at Cashin. Cashin caught the club, pulled the attacker forward, and introduced his face to an empty flour sack. The sack tore. White dust exploded over the man until he looked like an angry pastry. Sarah used the grandmother's broom on the second attacker's knee. He folded with a howl. Medical opinion? Cashin asked. Urgent joint correction. The roof groaned. Bram seized Sarah's skirt in his teeth and dragged her away just before a burning beam crashed where she had been standing. Cashin shielded her with his body. Heat rolled over his back. One arm locked around her waist, the other braced against the floor beside her head. For a breath, the burning mill disappeared. Sarah felt the hard line of him against her, the rapid beat of his heart, and his breath near her temple. His gold eyes searched her face. Hurt? No. Certain? You are heavy. A devastating diagnosis. It may be fatal if the roof joins you. He rose and pulled her up with him, keeping his hand at her waist one moment longer than balance required. The masked men recovered. There were 8 now, blocking the front and rear doors. Cashin looked at Sarah. I am going to ask you for one reasonable thing. I remained doubtful. Close your eyes. His body changed before she could obey. Power rolled through the mill. His coat tore at one shoulder as black fur swept over him. Bones lengthened, hands becoming enormous clawed paws. The wolf that landed between Sarah and the attackers was larger than a warhorse at the shoulder, sleek and black, with the same dark gold eyes. Every masked man reconsidered his employment. One dropped his club. Another whispered, "Oh." Cashin showed his teeth. The attackers fled through the rear door so quickly that 2 tried to occupy it at once. Bram chased them, barking with delighted authority. Outside, Sorel stretched her rope across the alley. 5 men fell in a single untidy row. I meant to do that, she announced. The burning roof cracked again. Cashin shifted back, seized a copper canister under one arm, and took Sarah's hand. Shirt torn, hair loose, he looked less like a cathedral carving now, and more like the dangerous prayer that carving warned against. Sarah forgot the fire for almost 2 seconds. Doctor. Yes. The fatal roof. Right. They escaped through the old water chute as the upper floor collapsed. Cashin went first, then caught Sarah around the hips when she slid after him. They landed knee-deep in the river channel, her hands on his shoulders and his face far too close to hers. Smoke darkened the morning sky. Sarah's pulse had not received permission to behave so foolishly. You can put me down, she said. I can. He did not. Cashin. I find I prefer hearing my name when you are holding on to me. She became aware that her fingers were tangled in his black hair. I was checking for roof damage. Inspection then. Not flirting. Obviously. Bram splashed into the channel carrying the seat of a masked man's trousers in his teeth. Cashin set Sarah down. The old hound dropped the cloth at their feet and wagged so hard that river water sprayed both of them. Excellent timing, Cashin told him. Bram looked pleased. They saved 1 sealed canister, the map, and 3 attackers. By the time Cashin's guard secured the district, the mill was ash. Duke Vare arrived in a green carriage before the smoke cleared. He was a narrow man with a wide mustache and the offended expression of someone who believed disasters should make appointments. Dr. Bellum Morn, the royal physician, sat beside him holding a scented cloth to his nose. A tragic accident, Vare declared. Your men attacked us, Sarah said. 1 flower-covered prisoner pointed at the Duke. He said no witnesses. Vare stared at him. I have never seen that man. Bram walked over and sat on the Duke's polished boot. Silence spread through the street. The Duke attempted to step away. Bram leaned harder. Remove this creature. Independent officer, Sarah said. It is ruining imported leather. He has a gift for improving expensive things. Dr. Morn inspected the canister from a safe distance. These are sanitation salts. Low Lantern was scheduled for fumigation. With ash fever? Cashin asked. That is an outrageous conclusion. Bram left Vare and sat on Morn. The physician's knees bent under the hound's weight. He remained upright only by grabbing the Duke's mustache. Vare screamed. Sorel applauded. The humor did not change the danger. Vare controlled the civic council, the warehouses, and the city watch. Morn controlled the official diagnosis. They could not make the canister disappear, but they could call it anything they pleased until enough people were dead. Cashin ordered both men confined pending inquiry. Alaric overruled him before sunset. The king sent a message from the palace. Duke Vare and Dr. Morn were essential to public order. They would remain free under royal guarantee. Sarah read the message twice. He still thinks protecting powerful people will keep the city calm, she said. Cashin stood beside the window of the district infirmary. Firelight cut his face into gold and shadow. No, he said. He thinks protecting the people he loves is the same as protecting the city. Sarah folded the message. He used to know the difference. Cashin's gaze settled on her. No jealousy showed there, only a quiet attention that made it impossible to hide behind anger. Do you still love him? He asked. Sarah considered lying. Bram entered and sat on her foot. Traitor, she muttered. The hound panted. I love the man he was, she said. Sometimes. That is not the same as wanting the man he became. Cashin looked out at Low Lantern. Good. The single word was calm. His hand, however, had closed around the stone windowsill hard enough to crack it. Chapter 7. One bed and two wolves. When Sarah returned to the palace, Queen Evelyn was sitting on the chapel floor in a plain linen shift, cutting her wedding gown into bandages. Gold leaves still clung to her hair. A pile of ivory silk lay across her knees. The archbishop watched from a pew with the expression of a man witnessing both charity and murder. "That lace is 300 years old," he whispered. Evelyn sliced through it. "Then it has had a full life." Sarah set down her case. The queen looked up. "How many are sick?" "At least 87 in Low Lantern. More by morning." "Because of me?" "Not originally. The district was deliberately exposed before your wedding. But you carried it through the palace." Evelyn's scissors stopped. Sarah did not soften the truth. She also did not sharpen it for pleasure. "Did you know what was in the Moonwell bottle?" she asked. "No. Bellum called it a strengthening tonic. Alaric said it came from the royal stores." Evelyn looked down at the ruined gown. "I thought you hated me because he chose me. For a while, I found it convenient. And now I dislike you for wearing 600 pearls during an epidemic. It seems safer." Evelyn laughed once, then covered her mouth. The laugh became a sob. Sarah sat beside her. She did not embrace her. Not yet. She placed a clean square of wedding silk within the queen's reach. Evelyn used it to wipe her eyes. "My uncle arranged the marriage," she said. "He told me Alaric needed a wife who could make the court hopeful again. He told me you had chosen your clinic over him. I chose not to abandon dying people for winter dances. He considered that unromantic. He told me you no longer loved him. That was not his decision to make." Evelyn nodded. "No, it was not." Alaric entered before Sarah could answer. He stopped when he saw the wedding gown becoming bandages. "Evelyn, what are you doing?" "Something useful. You should try it." Sarah looked at the queen with new respect. Alaric dismissed the attendants. Evelyn refused to leave, so he drew Sarah toward a side alcove instead. "I heard what happened at the mill," he said. "You could have died. Many people could have died. That was the purpose of the canisters. Vere denies it. Bram sat on him. A hound is not a court. He has a better conviction rate." Alaric took a breath. "Sarah, listen to me. I was wrong to take the Moonwell. I was wrong about many things. But I know you. You will work until there is nothing left of you, and Thorn will use that because it serves his authority." She stared at him. "Is that what you think you did?" she asked. "Protected me from being useful. I wanted a life after plague. Music. Children. Rooms that did not smell of vinegar and death. So did I." He looked startled. That, more than anything, told her how little he had understood. "I never loved suffering," Sarah said. "I endured it because someone had to. You loved me when my work made you feel heroic. When peace came, you saw the cost in my face and decided I was the cost." His hand closed around her arm. "That is not fair." Pain bit beneath his fingers. Sarah reacted before patience could interfere. She drove the heel of her hand upward beneath his chin. His teeth clicked. He stumbled back into a carved saint and caught it in an undignified embrace. "Do not hold me when I have said no," she said. The chapel went silent. Evelyn set down her scissors. She was very clear. Alaric's face flushed. Cassian appeared in the doorway. He took in Sarah's raised hand, Alaric clutching a statue, and Evelyn holding enormous scissors. "Have I missed a medical consultation?" he asked. "The king developed a boundary," Sarah said. "I corrected it." Cassian walked to her, eyes on the red marks around her arm. Something cold entered his face. "Your Majesty," he said, "touch Dr. Vale without permission again, and your crown will be the least uncomfortable object I remove from your person." Alaric stepped forward. Evelyn lifted the scissors. "Please," she said. "I have had a difficult week." Alaric stopped. Sarah should not have enjoyed that moment as much as she did. She enjoyed it more when Bram wandered in, examined the room, and sat on Alaric's foot. By 2 a.m, Sarah could no longer see straight. Cassian found her trying to write a dosage on the chapel wall because she had mistaken it for a chart. "You need sleep," he said. "I need 6 more hours. I have ordered a bed prepared in my rooms." She blinked at him. "That is a bold prescription." His eyes warmed. "For you. I will be in the council chamber." "Oh, your disappointment is deeply flattering. It is exhaustion." Naturally. His bed was broad, clean, and occupied. Bram lay across the center with all 4 paws extended. He had somehow acquired Cashin's second pillow and placed his brass badge on it. Sarah tried pushing him. The hound became boneless. She tried pulling the blanket. He rolled onto it. Cashin leaned against the doorway. His torn shirt had been replaced, though the top two fastenings remained open. Sarah looked away too late. "He is your officer," Cashin said. "Independent. He is in my bed. Then he may be leaning toward you politically." They ended up on opposite ends of the sitting room couch, fully clothed, with Sarah's feet beneath Cashin's coat. She intended to close her eyes for 1 minute. When she woke, dawn touched the windows. Her cheek rested against Cashin's chest. His arm circled her waist. One of her legs lay between his, and his hand was spread over her hip, as if it had found a place it meant to keep. He was awake. "How long?" she whispered. "Long enough to lose feeling in my left arm." She began to move. His hand tightened once at her waist. Not enough to stop her. Enough to confess that he wanted to. Their faces were inches apart. "Cashin. I still prefer my name that way." Someone pounded on the outer door. Sarah sat up. Cashin closed his eyes briefly, a man accepting that civilization had failed him. Sister Leora rushed inside. "Evacuation wagons are taking Low Lantern to the North Hospice," she said. "Except the North Hospice burned down 11 years ago." Chapter 8. The wagons to nowhere. The city bells announced mercy. Citizens leaned from windows as 20 white wagons rolled out of Low Lantern beneath banners that read Royal Plague Relief. Families crowded inside. Mothers held babies. Old men clutched cooking pots and blankets. The wagons were traveling north. There was no hospice north of St. Orizon. There were only abandoned salt tunnels and the river cliffs. "Who signed the order?" Sarah asked as she ran down the palace steps. Leora held up the paper. "Dr. Morn." Duke Vare provided the wagons. Cashin shouted for his guard, but the palace portcullis did not rise. Royal soldiers stood on the wall above them. Alaric appeared between the battlements. "The Eastern Palace remains under quarantine. No armed force leaves." "Those wagons are sealed," Sarah called. "If the sick are locked together, they will die before they reach the tunnels." "Morn says they are being transferred. Morn tried to burn us in a mill." Alaric looked toward the chapel tower, where Evelyn remained ill. Sarah saw his decision form before he spoke. He would protect the person he loved. Again. He would call it caution. Again. "I cannot leave the palace undefended," he said. "Then don't," Cashin replied. "Open the gate. Your army stays inside." Cashin's wolf flashed in his eyes. Iron groaned beneath his hand. Sarah knew he could tear the gate apart. She also knew the delay would cost lives. Sorel appeared from a drain beneath the wall. Mud streaked her purple coat. "I continue to recommend pantries," she said. "They have better exits." The drain was narrow but open. Sarah dropped to her knees. Cashin caught her elbow. "Wait for me. You will not fit. That is not comforting. Then be angry while you open the gate." His jaw tightened. "Sura." She touched his face before she could decide whether it was wise. His skin was warm beneath her palm. "I am not going alone," she said. "I have Sorel, Leora, and Bram." Bram looked into the drain and sneezed. "3 women and a disgusted officer," Sarah amended. Cashin turned his face just enough that his lips brushed the center of her palm. The contact was brief. It burned all the way to her shoulder. "I will find you," he said. She believed him. The women emerged outside the wall smelling like wet stone and poor choices. Bram came last, having shifted into his elderly human form to fit through the drain. He wore a blanket around his waist and carried his brass badge between his teeth. "I hate government work," he announced, then shifted back into a hound. They borrowed 4 horses from a funeral stable. Sorel claimed this was not theft because the horses appeared eager. They caught the last wagon at the North Bridge. Sarah rode alongside and hammered on the driver's box. "Stop!" The driver whipped her horse. Sorel stood in her stirrups and leaped onto the wagon roof with the reckless grace of a woman who had escaped through many windows. "I have always wanted to rob the government openly," she shouted. "This is rescue." Sarah called. "Do not spoil it." Leora reached the bridge bell and pulled the emergency rope. Instead of ringing, the entire bell dropped from its rotten beam and smashed through the planks in front of the lead wagon. The horses reared. Drivers cursed. 20 wagons stopped in a tangled line. "I meant to do that," Leora said faintly. Men in gray masks jumped down with clubs. Sarah opened the rear door of the nearest wagon. Silver vapor rolled out. Families lay crowded on the floor, coughing and half-conscious. Copper vents in the ceiling were releasing ash-fevered dust into the sealed compartment. This was not evacuation. It was execution made to look like disease. "Open every wagon," she shouted. Bram attacked the wheel harnesses, freeing the horses so the drivers could not continue. Sorel kicked one guard off a roof and landed on another with both knees. Leora swung the bell rope in frightened circles and somehow struck 3 men. Sarah climbed into the wagon to drag out a child. A gloved hand seized the back of her coat. The driver pulled her down onto the bridge. "Dr. Morn said you were not to interfere again," he hissed. He raised his club. Sarah grabbed the nearest object, a wooden chamber pot from a family's luggage, and drove it into his stomach. The pot was empty. His expression suggested that dignity had not received the news. He bent. She struck his wrist. The club fell. Another guard caught her from behind. An arm crushed her ribs. Her feet left the ground. Bram turned, but 2 men threw a chain around his neck. Sarah kicked backward and connected with a shin. The guard swore and carried her toward the bridge rail. Then the royal portcullis exploded outward behind them. A black wolf cleared the broken gate in one leap. Cashin crossed the road like midnight given teeth. He hit the guard holding Sarah without touching her. The man flew into a hay cart on the riverbank and vanished beneath a burst of yellow straw. Cashin shifted before Sarah reached the ground. One arm caught her beneath the knees, the other behind her back. "You found me," she said, breathless. His face was controlled. His eyes were not. "I said I would." He set her on her feet, but kept one arm around her. The hay-covered guard tried to rise. Cashin looked at him. "The woman you threw from that wagon is under my protection. Try it again, and I will introduce you to the river from a greater height." The guard lay down. Cashin's physician army spread across the bridge. They broke wagon locks, carried out families, and flooded the silver vents with vinegar foam. Within minutes, the false rescue became a real one. Alaric arrived with royal cavalry after the last door was opened. His horse stopped beside Sarah. "Are you injured?" he asked. Cashin's hand remained at the small of her back. "No," Sarah said. "I came as soon as Evelyn was secured." That sentence contains the entire problem. Alaric looked at Cashin's torn shirt, then at Sarah wrapped in Cashin's coat. "You move quickly," he said. Cashin's thumb traced one slow line against Sarah's back. The gesture looked accidental. It was not. "When lives are involved," he said, "I do." Chapter 9. What she could carry the rescued families filled the old bathhouse by sunset. Every room became a ward. Children slept in empty marble pools. The steam chamber held patients with the worst coughs. Physicians mixed Moonwell salts in the changing room, while Sorel guarded the supply with 2 knives and an invoice book. "Charity is not disorder," she told anyone who reached for a bottle without signing. Sister Leora stood at the entrance and called every patient by name. She knew who had lost a husband, who could not hear well, whose daughter lived across the river, and which old woman would pretend to be healthy if offered the chance to give her bed to a child. She still feared the dead. When the first covered body was carried past, Leora shook so hard that her ledger rattled. Then she said the dead woman's name aloud. Marta Bell. Baker. 3 sons. Hated raisins. She recorded the death without looking away. Sarah loved her for that. By midnight, the bathhouse held more patients than medicine. Sarah moved from bed to bed until faces blurred. Every cough sounded like Mara's. Every reaching hand felt like a command. She could save this one if she worked faster. She could save the next if she skipped water. She could save all of them if she stopped being human first. A little boy stopped breathing in the west pool. Sarah climbed down, opened his airway, and forced air into him until he gasped. Someone called her from the steam room, then from the doorway, then from behind. "Dr. Vale. Suha. Please." She turned toward all of them and saw none clearly. Cashin stepped into her path. "Move," she said. "Which patient needs you most?" "All of them." "That is not a medical answer." "Do not lecture me." "I am not." "Choose." The steamroom patient had a worsening chest rattle. The woman at the door had a bleeding hand. The man behind Sarah was frightened, but standing. "Steamroom," she said. "Go. The others are mine." He took the bleeding woman's hand, called another physician for the frightened man, and sent a guard for water. No order for Sarah to rest. No gentle insult suggesting that her strength was the problem. He simply took the work she could not carry. For the next 6 hours, they divided the impossible between them. At dawn, the last critical fever broke. Sarah found Cashin in the empty cold pool washing blood and medicine from his hands. Morning light came through the broken roof and lay across his black hair. She sat on the pool's edge. "You were right," she said. "I will record the date. Do that and I will deny it." He dried his hands. "About what?" "Choosing. I keep thinking if I accept that I cannot save everyone, I am deciding some lives matter less." Cashin came to stand between her knees. "A boundary is not a grave," he said. "It is the line that lets you return tomorrow." Sarah looked at his scarred hands. "Who taught you that?" "No one. I learned after burying the physicians who never did." His voice held no performance, only memory. She touched one pale scar near his thumb. His breath changed. "And who taught you to warm the stethoscope?" she asked. "A 6-year-old girl called me a cold-handed tyrant. Wise child. She rules a bakery now." Sarah smiled. Cashin lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to the inside of her wrist, exactly where he had first caught her pulse. The kiss was soft. Nothing else about the moment was. Heat moved through her. His eyes stayed on hers as his lips traveled once to the heel of her palm. "Is this another examination?" she whispered. "No. Flirting. I have progressed beyond flirting." He gave her time to move away. She caught the front of his shirt and pulled him closer. His mouth met hers. Cashin kissed with the same control he brought to a plague ward, which meant she felt exactly how much power he was holding back. One hand curved around the back of her neck. The other settled at her waist, drawing her to the edge of the pool until his body stood between her thighs. Sarah tasted coffee, exhaustion, and a promise neither of them had spoken. She slid her fingers into his hair. His control broke just enough to make him groan against her mouth. Bram appeared at the pool entrance. He looked at them. Sarah looked at him. The old hound turned around with exaggerated dignity and sat facing the wall. His tail knocked over a copper bucket. The crash echoed through the bathhouse. Cashin rested his forehead against Sarah's. "He is trying," she said. "I will add discretion to his next performance review." They kissed once more slowly, while Bram guarded the door and did not interrupt again. Chapter 10. The bride who changed sides. Queen Evelyn arrived at the bathhouse wearing a sealed breathing veil and carrying a silver incense burner. Alaric was not with her. For women from her household followed with trunks of palace linen, food, and every pearl from the wedding canopy. Sorel opened one trunk and whistled. "I apologize for several thoughts I had about you," she told Evelyn. "Only several? The others remain under review." Evelyn placed the incense burner on Sarah's table. "My uncle gave these to every noble household before the wedding. Bellum said the smoke prevented fever." Sarah opened the lid. The ash inside glittered silver. Bram backed away and growled. "It spread fever," Sarah said. Evelyn's eyes closed. "I carried one through the palace during the wedding procession. You did not know. Neither did the families in those wagons. Ignorance did not make the vapor kinder to them." That answer made Sarah look at her differently. Evelyn removed a folded plan from beneath her cloak. "Tomorrow night is the blessing of the moon. Every public fountain will run during the procession. My uncle's company replaced the fountain filters last week." Cashin spread the plan across the table. Blue lines ran from a Vare warehouse to cisterns beneath every district. This was not a hidden clue. It was a city-sized weapon. "Why bring this to us?" he asked. "Because Alaric still believes he can question my uncle privately and avoid panic. Because I spent my life being told that a pleasant woman keeps peace." Evelyn's voice shook, but she continued. "I would like to be unpleasant enough to keep people alive." Sarah reached across the table and took her hand. "You are improving quickly." Evelyn gave a wet laugh. "Do you forgive me?" "Not yet." The Queen nodded. "But," Sarah said, "I believe you. Those are different doors. We can open one before the other." Evelyn gripped her fingers. The attack came from the laundry. A palace servant rolled in a cart of fresh sheets. Bram sniffed once and lunged. The servant ran. The cart struck the table. A glass bottle flew from beneath the linen, shattered on the floor, and released yellow gas. "Outside!" Sarah shouted. Cashin overturned the table across the spill. Sorel threw open the high windows. Leora, who remembered every substance ever listed in a death record, grabbed a barrel of sour beer. "Yellow widow gas dissolves in yeast," she cried. They flooded the floor. The gas sank into the foam and died with a smell like rotten eggs in a brewery. Patients fled coughing. No one was poisoned. Bram returned dragging the servant by one trouser leg. The man's wig had fallen off. Dr. Bellum Morn stared up at them from the floor. Without his powdered hair, he looked like a surprised egg. "This is a misunderstanding," he said. Bram sat on his chest. "A heavy one," Sorel observed. Morn wheezed. "I was ordered." "By Duke Vere?" Sarah asked. "I cannot say." Bram settled more comfortably. "Corvin Vere." Morn squeaked. "He said Low Lantern had to be emptied before the river charter vote. He promised the fever would remain contained. Then the Queen became infected, and he said the wedding could spread it among every family that might oppose him." Evelyn went still. "He used me." Morn looked at her. "Your Majesty, I begged him to choose another carrier." The silence that followed was almost respectful. Sorel picked up the empty beer barrel and placed it over his head. "That," she said, "was for making the wrong part of the confession about yourself." Morn staggered blindly, tripped over the laundry cart, and rolled into an empty washing vat. His legs stuck out. Leora sat on the rim to keep him there. She was trembling. She was also smiling. "I remembered something else," she said. "Dr. Morn hates enclosed spaces. It is in his medical record." Sarah looked around the table at the women beside her. A smuggler who charged the rich to medicate the poor, a terrified nun who never forgot a name, and a queen willing to ruin her own crown rather than remain a useful fool. At first, each had seemed like a complication. Now they looked like the reason the city might survive. Cashin placed one hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Vere will no more failed," he said. "He will release the cisterns early." Outside, the blessing bells began ringing one full day ahead of schedule. The fountains turned silver. Chapter 11. When the city water shone, the people of St. Orizon had been taught since childhood to gather when the blessing bells rang. They came carrying cups. They came with babies wrapped in blankets and old parents leaning on their arms. Children ran ahead to the fountains, laughing at the silver water rising beneath the moon. Sarah climbed onto the bathhouse roof and shouted until her throat tore. "Do not drink." The nearest crowd stopped. Farther down the hill, people still lifted cups. Cashin seized the great alarm hammer and struck the bathhouse bell in the plague rhythm. 3 fast, 2 slow, 3 fast. Other medical bells answered. Physicians ran into the streets. Guards overturned drinking tables and threw barricades around fountains. One elderly man punched a guard for knocking away his cup. "That was my good cup." "Sir, the water contains plague." The old man considered this. "Then you may break it." He handed over a second cup. Sarah, Cashin, Evelyn, Sorel, Leora, and Bram raced toward the central moonwell. The silver flow began there, beneath the Hall of Civic Lands where Duke Vere kept both his office and his private dining room. He always did enjoy convenience, Evelyn said through a breathing veil. They found the hall defended by city watchmen in Vere green. Cashin's physician guard formed a black line across the square. No one drew a blade. Steel would turn frightened citizens into casualties, and Vere knew it. The Duke appeared on the balcony above them. His mustache was shorter on one side after Dr. Morn's desperate grip, but he had attempted to repair the damage with black wax. The repaired half pointed upward like an accusing finger. "Citizens," he shouted, "Lord Thorn has seized the palace, burned a lawful sanitation mill, and now claims our sacred water is poisoned. Ask yourselves who benefits from panic." Bram walked to the center of the square and sat facing the balcony. Laughter moved through the crowd. Vere's repaired mustache began to slide. "That animal has no authority here." "More than you," someone called. The Duke slapped at his face. The waxed mustache came free and stuck to his glove. Even several city watchmen laughed. Evelyn stepped forward and removed her veil. The crowd gasped. Pearl infection lines remained visible beneath her ear, but she stood straight in a plain blue dress with no crown. "My uncle gave me plague and sense," she said. "He sent infected families towards sealed tunnels. He ordered the fountains open tonight. I carried his poison through my own wedding because he lied to me, and because I found it comfortable to believe him." Vere stared down at her. Evelyn, you are fevered. You do not understand what you are saying. I understand that you promised me a happy marriage while using my body to murder your enemies. Everything I built was for you. No, it was in my name. That is not the same thing. The city watch line wavered. Sorel climbed onto a fountain rim. I have Dr. Morn if anyone wants the duller version. 2 bathhouse porters rolled the laundry vat into the square. Morn's head and shoulders stuck over the top. Leora sat behind him with the burial ledger open on her knees. Duke Vere ordered the poison, Morn said immediately. I am prepared to become a very cooperative witness. You attempted to gas a hospital, Sarah reminded him. A moderately cooperative witness. Vere turned and fled the balcony. The moon well, Cashin said. He will empty the remaining canisters. The city watch opened ranks for Evelyn. They did not open them for Cashin. He looked at the captain. You know what is in the water. I have orders from the king. No foreign alpha enters the royal cistern. Alaric rode into the square at that moment. He wore no crown. He carried it beneath one arm. For one suspended breath, Sarah saw the man from the first plague, tired, frightened, and finally willing to be frightened in public. He threw the crown into the captain's hands. Then obey the king, Alaric said. Open the hall. The doors swung inward. They found the stair to the moonwell blocked by Vere guards. Cashin's men fought them with shield edges, wash poles, and sacks of flour taken from a nearby bakery. No one died. Several men lost their trousers to Bram. Sarah ran down the spiral stair with Cashin beside her. Below the city lay a cavern of black stone. Clear moonwell water rose through ancient rock and poured into 4 great channels. The western channel had turned silver. Vere stood on the narrow control bridge above it, emptying the last copper canister into the current. Stop! Sarah shouted. He kicked the empty container away. The poor district will empty whether it coughs or burns. That river land is worth more than every shack upon it. People live there. People live everywhere. Land beside a royal canal is rare. Cashin moved toward him. Vere pulled a lever. An iron gate dropped between Cashin and Sarah. She was trapped on the bridge with the Duke. Sera! Cashin seized the bars. The hinges screamed beneath his strength, but held. Vere drew a short ceremonial sword. Doctors should learn when a patient is beyond saving, he said. You are not my patient. He lunged. Sarah caught his sword arm with both hands and drove her forehead into his nose. He howled. The blade clattered onto the bridge. That was not elegant, he said. I save elegance for insured patients. He grabbed her throat. Sarah struck his ears with both palms. His grip loosened. She twisted free, but her heel slipped on the wet stone. The channel rushed below her. Vere shoved. Cashin tore the iron gate out of the wall. He crossed the bridge in 2 strides and caught Sarah around the waist as she fell over the edge. Her body swung above the silver water. Cashin dropped to one knee, one hand locked on the bridge rail, the other holding her. I have you, he said. She looked up into his fierce gold eyes. You do. Vere raised the fallen sword behind him. Bram arrived in hound form and struck the Duke between the shoulders. Vere flew forward, sailed over Cashin, and landed in the shallow cleansing basin beside the channel. The basin was filled with purple neutralizing dye. He surfaced with purple skin, purple clothes, and 1/2 of a black mustache. Sorel reached the bridge in time to see him. I charge extra for that shade, she said. Cashin pulled Sarah back onto the bridge. He held her against him so tightly that she could feel the tremor he refused to show anywhere else. Do not do that again, he said into her hair. Fall. Nearly leave me. The words were rough and private. Sarah touched the back of his neck. Then keep holding on. His mouth found her temple. Behind them, Vere tried to climb from the basin. Bram sat on his hands. The Duke remained in the dye. Chapter 12. The medicine returned stopping the canisters did not clean the water already in the pipes. St. Orizon had one defense left. The Royal Moonwell Reserve, a sealed chamber of concentrated healing water, kept beneath the palace for war. Opening it would flush every public fountain, and leave the crown without a private reserve for years. Alaric held the key. He stood before the mechanism, while the council shouted around him. That water belongs to the throne, the archbishop protested. The throne does not drink, Alaric said. He broke the royal seal. Blue water thundered into the city channels. At every fountain, silver turned to clear sapphire and then faded. Physicians tested cup after cup. Bram sniffed the central basin, sneezed once in the archbishop's direction, and drank. The crowd cheered. Sarah did not. Cashin was bleeding beneath his torn sleeve. The cut was shallow, made by the edge of Vare's contaminated canister when he tore out the gate. A pearl line had already begun moving from his wrist toward his elbow. "Infirmary," she said. "There are exposed children in the square. And 40 physicians with them. You are my patient now. Try to escape, and I will use restraints." His mouth curved despite the gray beneath his skin. "Flirting again?" "Threatening." "I remain interested." They reached the palace chapel as his fever rose. Sarah cleaned the wound, packed it with blackroot, and counted his breaths. Too fast. The moonwell in the city pipes was diluted. He needed concentrated medicine. There was none left. She searched every case anyway. Her hands remained steady until she reached the last empty compartment. Then they did not. Cashin lay on the narrow chapel bed, black hair damp against his forehead. Even feverish, he watched her with unbearable attention. "Suha." "No. You do not know what I was going to say. You were going to tell me to treat someone else. There are children. They have physicians. You have me." He breathed through pain. "A dangerous advantage. You entered the mill. You opened the wagons. You tore a gate out of a wall. I am not losing you because you have confused self-sacrifice with manners." Her voice broke on the final word. Cashin reached for her. His fingertips brushed her wrist. "I love you," he said. It was not dramatic. He said it like a diagnosis he had verified and could no longer ethically withhold. Sarah closed her eyes. "That is extremely inconvenient." "I suspected. I love you too." His fever-bright eyes softened. The chapel door opened. Alaric stood there holding a small blue bottle. The last Moonwell vial. Sarah stared at it. "Evelyn drank only 1 dose before she became ill," he said. "Morn told her to save the rest for the wedding night. I found it in her dressing case." He crossed the chapel and put it in Sarah's hand. For a moment, none of them spoke. The bottle had traveled from Sarah's clinic to a royal bride, from selfish fear into catastrophe, and now back to the woman from whom it had been taken. "Give it to him," Alaric said. Sarah searched his face. "You were exposed in the cistern too." "Bram cleared me." The hound sat at Alaric's feet. Alaric looked down. "He cleared you of plague," Sarah said. "He has other concerns." A laugh escaped Cashin, then became a cough. Sarah poured the medicine between his lips. The pearl line stopped at his elbow. For 1 hour, nothing changed. Sarah sat beside him with one hand over his heart. Alaric remained near the door. He could have left. Perhaps he understood that leaving had become the central failure of his life. At last, Cashin's fever broke. His eyes opened. "There you are," Sarah whispered. "Was I elsewhere? You were being troublesome. Then I was myself." He lifted her hand to his mouth. Alaric looked away. Later, when Cashin slept, Alaric found Sarah beneath the chapel colonnade. Dawn had begun beyond the palace walls. The city smelled of vinegar, wet stone, and the first bread baked after terror. "I opened the reserve," he said. "I know. I returned the medicine. I know that too. It does not repair what I did." Sarah turned toward him. The old Alaric would have offered a grand promise. The new king would have offered land, title, or regret disguised as command. This man offered no defense. "No," she said. "It does not." He nodded as if the words hurt and were deserved. "I loved you," he said. "I think some part of me always will. You loved me when loving me made you brave. When it became ordinary work, you wanted someone who made forgetting easy. Evelyn made the court feel alive. She is not responsible for what you did to me. Neither am I. If I had chosen differently, you did choose. Many times. That is why I can forgive you someday without returning to you." He swallowed. "Is there truly no road back to us?" "No," Sarah said. She gave him the clean answer he had once denied her. "There is no road back." He looked toward the chapel where Cashin slept. "You love him?" "Yes. He will never give you a peaceful life." Sarah thought of Cashin cleaning vomit from a chapel floor, carrying children from sealed wagons, and taking half an impossible workload without asking her to become smaller. "Peace is not the absence of difficult work," she said. "It is knowing who will lift the other side." Alaric closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked older in sorrow, though not wiser enough to mistake sorrow for entitlement. "Goodbye, Sarah." Goodbye, Alaric. He walked away alone. Bram followed him for 3 steps, then returned to Sarah and leaned against her leg. Yes, she told the hound. I know. He was still lying about something. Bram looked up. He said goodbye as if he would not send me a 6-page apology by noon. Bram wagged. The letter arrived before breakfast. Sarah used it to level a crooked medicine table. Chapter 13. Judgment in the Square. Duke Corvin Vare's trial lasted one morning because the evidence was not a button, a cipher, or a suspicious footprint. It was 87 sick residents, 20 poison wagons, a burned mill, silver fountains, a royal bride, an elderly werewolf officer, and Dr. Morn shouting from a laundry vat. The square was full. Sister Leora read the names of every person harmed. Her voice trembled at the first name and strengthened with each one after. When she finished, the crowd repeated the names back to her. She wept openly and did not apologize. Sorel testified next. She wore a respectable black dress over at least 6 visible knives. Did you steal medicine from the Vare warehouse? The magistrate asked. Yes. Did you then distribute it without a license? Also yes. Did you sell any of it? To rich people. At what price? An offensive one. The magistrate rubbed his forehead. Why should this court trust you? Bram sat beside Sorel, not on her foot. She smiled. Because the officer does. The crowd cheered. Evelyn surrendered every Vare land claim in Low Lantern. The river property would belong to the families who lived upon it. She also petitioned to annul her marriage. Alaric granted it. He did not look at Sarah while he did. Vare received no dungeon where servants might make his punishment comfortable. He was sentenced to rebuild the district he had tried to clear, under physician guard supervision, for 12 years. His first duty was cleaning every public fountain with a small brush. Bram was appointed his supervisor. The old hound sat on Vare's cloak whenever he slowed. Dr. Morn lost his office and was assigned to the bathhouse laundry. Sorel arranged for every sheet to be slightly too large for the wringer. The masked wagon drivers repaired the north bridge, while Leora controlled the bell rope. None complained after she accidentally dropped the bell a second time. Alaric remained king, but the civic council gained elected seats from Low Lantern. He attended the first meeting without perfume, crown, or excuses. Sarah did not call that redemption. She called it work begun late. Evelyn moved into a small house near the district school and used the sale of her pearls to build a clean water station. Children adored her because she knew every dance in the royal court and was willing to perform them badly in mud. Sarah forgave her on a rainy afternoon when Evelyn arrived at the clinic with 6 boxes of bandages and no speech prepared. There is tea, Sarah said. Is that forgiveness? It is tea. Do not become demanding. Evelyn smiled. One door at a time. Sister Leora became keeper of the city health records. She still feared bodies, so she trained 2 fearless apprentices and personally memorized every living patient. Sorel received an official import license. She framed it, hung it in her shop, and continued smuggling because, she claimed, respectability lacked exercise. As for Sarah, she returned to her old clinic after the trial and found a gold key on the table. Cashin stood beside it. His arm remained bandaged, but his color had returned. In a black coat with his hair tied neatly at his neck, he looked once again like a ruler designed to make sensible women question their planning. What is this? She asked. A key. Your diagnostic gift continues to astonish. It opens the new Independent Healers Hall on River Street. 30 beds, 2 operating rooms, a pharmacy, living quarters, and a courtyard large enough for Bram to insult visitors. Sarah stared at him. Who owns it? You do. The deed is in your name. The charter forbids any crown, council, husband, or exceptionally persuasive hound from taking control. Her throat tightened. You built me a hospital? I funded a building. You will build the hospital. What do you want in return? Cashin stepped closer. Everything, he said softly, but nothing you do not choose to give. His fingers touched her waist. Sarah felt the hidden possession in the careful gesture, the desire he kept leashed because he would rather ache than turn love into command. She placed the key on the table. That answer was almost too good. I practiced. How many times? 37. Bram left after 12. She laughed, caught his collar, and kissed him. He lifted her onto the medicine table. Bottles rattled. One rolled toward the edge, and Cashin caught it without taking his mouth from hers. "Show off," she whispered. Physician's reflex. His hands settled at her hips. Her knees framed him. The kiss deepened, slow and hungry, until every sharp memory in the room belonged to a life she had survived rather than a future she feared. Bram scratched once at the outer door. Then, demonstrating remarkable professional growth, he went to sleep in the hall. Chapter 14. The new bride 6 months later. Sarah married Cashin in the courtyard of the Independent Healers' Hall. She wore blue wool because it could be washed. Evelyn arranged moonflowers in her hair. Leora held the patient ledger during the ceremony because she trusted it more than a prayer book. Sorel supplied the wine and refused to explain its border stamps. Alaric did not attend. He sent a carved medicine chest with no letter inside. Sarah accepted the chest. She had reached the kind of forgiveness that did not require reopening a door. Cashin wore black, his thick dark hair tied back and his gold eyes fixed on Sarah as if the entire crowded courtyard were a minor administrative inconvenience. When the officiant asked whether he would honor her work, her freedom, and her authority over her own life, he said, "Yes," before the question ended. When the officiant asked Sarah whether she would honor his duties and stand beside him in danger, she said, "Within reason." Cashin smiled. "I expected nothing safer." Bram served as witness. He wore his brass quarantine badge and a wreath of blue flowers. Halfway through the vows, he stole a sausage from the wedding table and hid it beneath the officiant's robe. No one discovered this until the officiant knelt. The ceremony paused for several minutes. That night, Cashin carried Sarah into their rooms above the healer's hall. "I can walk," she said, arms around his neck. "I know. Then this is unnecessary." Entirely. His hidden possessiveness was less hidden now. He looked pleased by the word wife, pleased by her hands in his hair, and almost indecently pleased when she locked the door behind them. Sarah gave him her wedding present before he could kiss her senseless. It was a black leather cover for his royal seal, stamped in gold with the words, "Wash your hands first." Cashin examined it solemnly. "You have placed medical instructions over the symbol of my absolute authority." "Yes. I love it." "I know." He set the seal aside and drew her against him. His mouth brushed hers once, then again, taking his time now that there were no bells, no burning mills, and no kings at the door. His hand slid along her back. Sarah loosened the fastening at his throat, revealing only the clean linen and bandage over the last pale mark of the cistern wound. She kissed the bandage. His breath caught. "Inspection?" he asked. "Perhaps." "Flirting?" "I have progressed beyond flirting." He laughed against her mouth. Then both of them looked toward the bed. Bram lay across the center. He had stolen both pillows, the wedding blanket, and Cashin's side of the mattress. His flower wreath rested over one eye. Cashin folded his arms. "Officer Alder." Bram opened the other eye. "This is my wedding night." The hound yawned. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and scratched his ear. His hind leg began kicking the blanket. "He did wait until after the ceremony," she said. An inspiring respect for law. Bram shifted. An elderly man now occupied the bed beneath the blanket, wreath still crooked over one eye. "The couch is excellent," he told Cashin. "I tested it during your 37th proposal rehearsal." Cashin pointed at the door. Bram took the sausage from beneath his pillow, wrapped the wedding blanket around his shoulders, and walked out with grave dignity. He returned the blanket 2 seconds later after Sarah called his name. When the door closed, Cashin turned the key. "Independent officer," Sarah reminded him. "Outside my jurisdiction." He crossed the room. Sarah met him halfway. Below them, the healer's hall settled into quiet. A nurse laughed in the courtyard. Clean water moved through the pipes. Somewhere in the corridor, Bram arranged himself across the couch and guarded their door without scratching it once. Sarah had not saved everyone. She had learned that no good physician could. She had saved who she could, trusted other hands with the rest, and built a life in which love did not ask her to abandon her work or carry it alone. Cashin lifted her hand and kissed the scar on her thumb. "Doctor," he murmured, "is this where you strike me with a pestle?" "Only if you forget to wash first." He showed her both clean hands. She pulled him down into the kiss he had earned. Follow Moonlit Romance Library for more fierce hearts, faithful wolves, and second chances.